What's the probability of evolution? The answer next on today's Creation Moments. And now, here's our Creation Moments host, Ian Taylor.
Evolutionists claim that life started from non-living matter in some sort of primeval soup. Over the years, they have presented several scenarios of how this might have happened. They have suggested isolated ponds, pools of water on the sides of volcanoes, and so on. On previous Creation Moments, we have examined some of these claims. Today, we want to look at the general mathematical principles involved in any of these scenarios. Just how incredible are evolutionists' claims about the origin of life? Given the conditions evolutionists claim existed at the origin of life, the chances of evolving the simple, common iso-1 cytochrome C protein is 1 chance out of 1 followed by 75 zeros. But that's not a living, reproducing thing. Given the same conditions, the chances of getting a DNA molecule with the ability to reproduce is 100 billion to 1. Well, the chance of getting a minimal cell works out to 1 chance out of 1, followed by 4.5 million zeros. Rigorous examination of evolutionist claims about the origin of life shows that every evolutionary claim about how life started is just as fanciful. As every believer has testified, God is the source of all life, including yours and mine. It has always been so, and it will always be so.
Even if Miller's experiment were valid, you're still light years away from making life. It comes down to this. No matter how many molecules you can produce with early Earth conditions, plausible conditions, you're still nowhere near producing a living cell. And here's how I know. If I take a sterile test tube and I put in it a little bit of fluid with just the right salts, just the right balance of acidity and alkalinity, just the right temperature, the perfect solution for a living cell, and I put in it 1 living cell. This cell is alive. It has everything it needs for life. Now I take a sterile needle and I poke that cell, and all its stuff leaks out into this test tube. You have in this nice little test tube all the molecules you need for a living cell. Not just the pieces of the molecules, but the molecules themselves. And you cannot make a living cell out of them. You can't put Humpty Dumpty back together again. So what makes you think that a few amino acids dissolved in the ocean are going to give you a living cell? It's totally unrealistic.
So great-grandpa was soup. They asked me to speak at this college in Boston one time. They said, you can speak to our students if our professors can ask you any questions they want, because we like to show the students how dumb you Christians really are. I said, I would be honored to come for that. So I got there, and there were 6 professors and all their students in the room. I felt like Daniel in the lion's den, you know. I said, folks, I got my charts out here, and I said, I believe the Bible. The Bible says God made everything 6,000 years ago. 4,400 years ago, there was a big flood, destroyed the world. Noah saved 2 of each kind, not every species, just the basic kinds on the ark. Now, since then, there's been a whole lot of varieties produced. Big dogs, little dogs, curly hair, straight hair, no question. But just basic kinds on the ark. And then I told them what they believe, because most of them don't know what they believe. You got to tell them. You guys believe 20 billion years ago, Big Bang, 4.6 billion years ago, the earth cooled down, it rained on the rocks for millions of years, turned them into soup, and the soup came alive 3 billion years ago. One professor was getting kind of upset about that time. He said, Hovind, you realize there are hundreds of varieties of dogs in the world? I said, yes, sir, there's a bunch. He said, do you mean to tell me that all those dogs came from only 2 dogs on Noah's Ark? You expect me to believe that? I said, sir, would you look at what you're teaching your students? You're teaching your students that all the dogs in the world came from a rock. He didn't have any more questions after that. I was in a debate one time, and afterwards this lady came up to me and she said, she was obviously upset. She said, tonight, you said that we believe we come from a rock. We do not believe that. I said, ma'am, just calm down. You're about to blow a gasket, I said, ma'am, do you believe in evolution? She said, yes, I do. I'm a professor here at the university. I said, okay, then tell me, where did we come from? She said, we came from a macromolecule. I said, and where did that come from? She said, from the oceans, from the prebiotic soup. I said, where did that come from? She said, well, it rained on the rocks for millions of years. It was so cool. You could see it was slowly dawning on her. You know, I do believe I come from a rock, don't I? Yes, ma'am, you certainly do. And I believe the evolution theory that's being taught in our schools is one of the dumbest and most dangerous religions in the history of humanity. If somebody says, do you believe in evolution? I simply say, what do you mean? Well, you know, evolution. Oh, no, I don't know. What do you mean? Which meaning are you talking about? Are you talking about cosmic evolution, that is the origin of time, space, and matter, the Big Bang? No, I don't believe in that. Are we talking about chemical evolution? Because according to the Big Bang theory, the Big Bang made hydrogen. Okay, then how did we get these other elements? Do you want me to believe that uranium evolved from hydrogen? They'll say, well, yeah, in stars you get fusion. Well, you can't fuse past iron. Check it out. So how do we get uranium? You want me to believe in stellar and planetary evolution, that the stars and planets form? Nobody's ever seen a star form. We see stars blow up all the time. It's called a nova or a supernova if it's a big one, but we've never seen one form. And yet there's enough stars out there right now that we know about that everybody on planet Earth can individually, personally own 11 trillion of these stars to yourself. Those are the ones we know about. We don't know about the ones that we don't know about. Then there'd have to be organic evolution. That's the origin of life. Nobody has a clue how life can get started from non-living material. Do you want me to believe that living things came from... You want me to believe in spontaneous generation proven wrong 200 years ago? No. I don't believe in any of those four. Maybe you're talking about macroevolution. That's where an animal changes into a different kind of animal. Nobody's ever seen that. Nobody's ever seen a dog produce a non-dog. I mean, you may get a big dog or a little dog, I understand, but you're going to get a dog, okay? Every time. And it could be the dog, the wolf, and the coyote had a common ancestor. I wouldn't argue about that. But I'll tell you what, every little kid knows they're the same kind of animal. I'll show you. Is anybody in here 5 or 6 years old? Who's 5 or 6? How old are you? 6. What's your name? Rachel? Rachel, I want you to take a test here, Rachel. Here we have a dog, a wolf, a coyote, and a banana. Which one is not like the others? The banana. Very good. Let's give her a hand. All right. Amen. We have college professors can't figure that one out. Yeah. See, the Bible says they bring forth after their kind. See, if they can bring forth, they're the same kind. Simple definition. Can they bring forth? A dog and a wolf can mate and bring forth. A dog and a banana cannot. Now see, Charlie Darwin wrote a book called The Origin of Species. And how the Christian church got lost in the 1800s and didn't catch that, I don't know. But they didn't catch what's happening. They're changing the definition. If they'd have stuck with the word kind, we never would have had this dumb evolution theory permeating our society. They bring forth, they're the same kind. Anyway, lastly, we have what's called microevolution. This is variations within the kinds. Now this one happens. So if you want to talk about variations, I agree, they happen. That is actually science. The first 5 meanings of the word are purely religious. That's because of a law known as the conservation of angular momentum. You see, if a spinning object breaks apart in a frictionless environment, the fragments will always spin the same way because the outside's moving faster than the inside. People say, what if they hit each other? They can't hit each other. Drop a hand grenade off, let it explode. The longer you wait, the further apart the fragments become. How are they going to hit each other out there in the field someplace? Duh. We could talk all night about the conservation of angular momentum, but the professor said, yes, I'm familiar with the conservation laws. I said, well then good, sir. I have a question for you. If the universe began as a swirling dot, Big Bang, like you said, shouldn't everything be spinning the same way? He said, yes. I said, would you tell me why then that 2 and possibly 3 of the planets are spinning backwards? Can you tell me why 8 of the 91 known moons are spinning backwards? Will you tell me why 4 planets have moons going both directions at the same time? Can you explain to me why some whole galaxies are spinning backwards? He said, that's interesting. I said, no, sir, that's more than interesting. That's kind of hard on your Big Bang Theory. The guy that works with the Eskimos sent me this postcard and said, Brother Hovind, I work with the Eskimos in Alaska. He said they've got over 40 words for snow up here, different types of snow. He said I got 15 layers of snow on my car in 8 hours. Not 15 inches, 15 layers of snow. Those layers are not different ages, not a year apart. Same thing with the textbook when they tell the kids about the Cenozoic, Mesozoic, Paleozoic. How many have ever heard of the geologic column before? We cover much more on that on video 4. The geologic column is a joke. It doesn't exist any place on planet Earth except in the textbooks. Get our video number 4 for more on that. Those layers are not different ages. All over the world, petrified trees have been found standing up, connecting these layers. Now, they're telling us these layers are different ages, and yet we've got petrified trees connecting them. I'm sorry, you're mistaken. The layers are not different ages. They all formed in one flood. And it doesn't take long for things to petrify. Things can petrify quickly. Here's a piece of petrified firewood. I've got a petrified pickle in my museum in Pensacola. The lid to the jar rusted off, and the pickle turned to stone inside the jar. We got the jar and the pickle. Come on up and see it. One kid sent me a bag of petrified acorns with a little note. He said, Brother Hovind, I put these acorns in the water to hope they would sprout, and I forgot about them. 10 years old, you know. Next spring, my mom found the bucket on the back porch and said, son, get rid of these acorns. He said, in less than a year, they turned to stone. I've got them in the museum. Stop and see our Dinosaur Adventureland in Pensacola, Florida. Here's a petrified fish giving birth. It doesn't take millions of years to give birth. Praise God. Okay. There's a petrified cowboy boot with the cowboy's legs still in it. It's on the table now. There's an article about it. It's called the Limestone Cowboy. How many of you have ever gone into a cave and the guide said, don't touch the formations. They take millions of years to form. They all have the same story, right? You go to Carlsbad, they'll say, yep, it took 250 million years to these formations in here. They say tiny drops of water slowly build these formations. One guy said it takes 1,000 years to grow from 1/10 of a centimeter to 10 centimeters, up to 2.5 inches. Maximum be 2.5 inches per 1,000 years. Well, I don't think so. Here are some 50-inch long stalactites growing under the Lincoln Memorial, built 1922. Here's a bat covered up with flowstone before it could rot. It doesn't take millions of years for that stuff to form. Here's 2-inch stalactites growing off a refrigeration shed in Pensacola, Florida. There's a building in Indiana. It's only 40 years old. The basement is full of huge flowstone formations in 40 years from water dripping through the limestone. There's a mine in Australia that was closed down for 55 years. When they opened it up to just check to see how it's doing, there were huge cave formations that formed in 55 years. There are 2 people inside that circle to give you an idea how big this is.
There are several million species of living things on planet Earth. Yet out of these several million species, one species, and only one, out of several million, have the gift of language and complex speech and everything that results from that gift. The human being. Every human being. This feature separates man from every other living species on the planet. But why? The evolution of modern human language would require both the development of the anatomical features for speech and also neurological changes in the brain to support language itself. But oddly, other species have some of these very capabilities, yet without full language ability. Other species have the ability to mimic human language, like so-called talking birds. Some apes and monkeys have even been taught rudimentary sign language and lexicograms. However, none of these species even comes close to the complexity of the thought, speech, and communication process of full language that only humans possess. Most of these species would have no abilities like these had they not come in contact first with humans, who painstakingly taught them the little that they can do. A 2-year-old human child is a universe above and apart in communication and language ability than the smartest of dogs, chimps, apes, and dolphins. Language is quite the separating and inexplicable feature of the human species. Language begins with thoughts and ideas, a self-awareness. Ideas are purposely then formulated into words and sentences with exacting structures. These exacting structures then develop complex language patterns, unique only to humans. This speech then brings forth writing. Writing brings forth journalizing the speech and the information. This journalizing of speech and information then creates a generational knowledge base. Generational knowledge base brings additions and changes to that knowledge base. And then there is what is called generational knowledge transference. With knowledge transference from generation to generation comes an increase in technologies. And so monkeys still swing in trees and eat bananas because they do not have language ability and generational knowledge transfer. Humans build cities, computers, cars, planes, and space shuttles. Humans eat what they want and cook their food and build restaurants and celebrate the entire eating experience. Humans have been to the moon. A monkey has been to the top of a tree. Humans write literature, plays, books, journals, and computer programs. Humans draw pictures expressing the ideas and words within their heads with art. No other living thing does these things. Chimps sling poo. Consider the following statements of Dr. Robert Berwick, professor of computational linguistics at Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He holds appointments in MIT's Department of Electrical Engineering and Computer Science and the Department of Brain and Cognitive Sciences. The following quotes and journalistic observations are taken from an article entitled MIT, No Easy Answers in Evolution of Human Language. Some researchers in recent years have speculated that mutations in a gene called FOXP2 might have played a fundamental role in the evolution of human language. That was based on research showing that the gene seems to be connected to language ability because some mutations to that gene produce specific impairments to language use. Dr. Berwick says, but the claim that the gene mutation is directly connected to the development of language is very unlikely to be right. This kind of straightforward connection is just not the way organisms are put together, he says. When it comes to something complex as language, one would be hard-pressed to come up with an example less friendly to evolutionary study. He goes on to say, and the specific FOXP2 connection is based on a whole chain of events, each of which is speculative. So there's little chance of the whole story being right. Rather, language is almost certainly the result of a far more complex and subtle interplay among a variety of factors, Dr. Berwick says, and it may never be possible to connect it to a specific genetic change. Or in other words, what Dr. Berwick is saying is it may never be possible to connect the explanation of the existence of language to naturalistic evolution. Dr. Berwick continues, even defining something as complicated as language in a precise way is daunting, as ongoing disputes over the significance of language experiments with apes, parrots, and dolphins have made clear. Dr. Berwick says, if you cannot define what language is, why study it from an evolutionary point of view? Ultimately, Dr. Berwick says, the important thing is to understand that language is, at bottom, something that takes place inside the human mind and is independent of any particular sound, sight, or motion. The same internal mental construction could be expressed through verbal speech, through writing, or through sign language, without changing its basic nature, Berwick says. It's not about this external thing you hear, he says. It's about the representation inside your head. Ah, yes, and now we open up the debate of the origins of human consciousness, the representations inside our heads, which produce language, and only in humans, the human consciousness, another evolutionary unexplainable and conundrum, another video for another day. So it seems the more we look at the real scientific evidence around us and ask the real scientific questions that beg to be asked, it seems that evolution is more and more exposed for what it is, largely, not totally, but largely, a collection of pseudoscientific ideas and straw man arguments passed off as scientific truth. What a shame, and how embarrassing. Let me repeat two of Dr. Berwick's most telling statements. One would be hard-pressed to come up with an example less friendly to evolutionary study. And if you can't define what language is, Why study it from an evolutionary point of view? I am so thankful that God gave me the language to be able to express this film in words.